Hi, a couple of years ago I started getting into D&D. As my passion for D&D grew, so did my collection of minis, and like many others out there, I now have boxes of shame, legions of unpainted minis. Now this is my underdog story. This is me painting every single one of my miniatures. Alright, so on to the next one. This is a Seahag from Reaper Bones Miniatures. I got this a while back ago and it's part of my collection of boxes of shame. I really like this miniature, but the first thing I need to do is to clean it up, mold lines and such. And for this I'm going to use two tools. This one is from Citadel, and then I tried using it, but then I noticed the sort of softer plastic. Sometimes it needed to be cut. Now everyone, be careful when you do stuff like that. I know that you're not supposed to cut towards yourself, but honestly, I've been using a knife since, almost I was a kid, so I'm fairly certain about this. Now I use just a clean toothbrush. One preferably that you don't use for brushing your teeth, to just sort of brush off all of the debris, and then I cleaned the model. I tried it out here on a base just to see sort of what it would be like. It's a 1-inch base, and I preferably use this Gorilla Glue because it has a nice brush, which means you can sort of apply it very, very evenly. Now, what I like to do when I sort of glue these things, especially Reaper Bones, is to sort of give it a good squeeze. Make sure that it's like, use all of your might and just sort of press it down. The thing that happens is, I believe, is that the glue just sort of, the bond gets much better. So after this, I primed it, and I used my old Xenophol priming because I want this to pop. So for those who haven't seen it before, it's just, using gray spray paint or primer, and then white from up above. You can really see all of the details sort of pop out much more once you sort of do that Xenophol priming. So for the first coat of paint, the base coat, I decided to go with, I think the color is called Wolf Grey. It's sort of a blue grayish tone, because I didn't want her to look like a, well, honestly, like a freaking Smurf. So I sort of wanted to dull it down a little bit, make it look a little bit more sort of like the actual sea. So I'm just base coating pretty much everything on her. No point in being, too detail oriented at this point. But again, dilute your paints with water. So for her hair, I decided to go with a much more sort of green, moss green sort of look. If you look in the concept art, you can actually see that I think her hair is sort of, almost made out of seaweed and stuff like that. So I took some time and just painted that on, and it was fairly painstaking and lots of small mistakes here and there, like you saw there. But using a fairly good, detail brush, and again, thin out your paints. I don't want to destroy the nice sort of highlighting I got from the Xenophol. So it looks something like that, which I'm fairly happy with so far. Now, the next step was to paint her clothes. She has some sort of dress on in this model, and I wanted really, really sort of earthy down, very calm color. So I went with sort of that mustard brownish. Now, for this, I think this one is called Turquoise Hydra or something like that. She has some webbing in between her fingers, so I sort of highlighted it with that, and then I actually just painted the entire hands with that, and because then I came back and sort of just highlighted the actual fingers with the same blue color. Now, it was at this point I discovered that she has a little friend, a little octopi, so I decided to paint him out as well. You can see it, sorry for the blurriness. Now, once that had dried, I decided to do some highlights. Now, as you can see here, I'm using an off-white color. I'm putting some dots down and I'm just mixing the colors that I've been using so far. Now, this gives me a nice sort of control over how bright do I want the highlight to be, and I'm trying to sort of make each color into a scale so I can see it going from sort of a purest blue-white to sort of a more dull down and eventually back to almost the base color. So I'm trying to make, like you see, a gradient there, and then just sort of mush it around, and then come in with a nice brush once you decided what you want, and then try to do some highlighting. And I think at this point I'm actually highlighting her face, and I wanted that to be fairly bright because obviously that's I've heard this somewhere that we humans tend to look at two things primarily when it comes to sort of a human figure. It's the face, and apparently it's the hands. So with both those, I sort of wanted to help that and just sort of make that pop out. Now, I used this color as well to sort of make her skin spotty. She had sort of I don't know if it's warts or something here and there on the skin, but I also sort of added a little bit more because I wanted her to almost have a fish-like skin. So at this point, I think I'm highlighting the clothes and stuff like that. So again, I'm just using the same color I had for the base coat, blend a little bit of off-white into it, and boom, you have your highlight color. Really simple and nice way. And that's what we have so far. Extreme close-up. Yeah, and you can see her nose is really bright. I think I toned that down eventually. But the next step was, of course, to work on hair, and you can see there on my wet palette that there's a nice gradient there going from a sort of brightest green to sort of the original moss green. And here I think I'm painting out the details on her feet. And yeah, that's where we have so far. And I'm really liking this model, how it's coming out. So once everything dried, I was actually thinking, should I use a blue or a green tone? But I sort of went with the blue tone because if you look again at the concept art, it feels like she is, you know how the sea, you think that it's really blue, but it's actually sort of blue-greenish. So the thing that I like about the colors I chose and also sort of thinning out the paints was that all of these colors, since I went with a blue base coat everywhere, all of the colors will have a slight hint of blue. Now I wanted to reinforce that with the blue wash, which I eventually went with. And let's see if I can show you how it looks like. It's not dry yet, so it looks a wee bit darker than it will be, but I'm so far really liking what I see when it comes to sort of how the wash really helps to bring out the details. And this is also good because I went a little bit overboard with the highlights, but as I said before, it seems like a wash dulls everything down and just sort of like neutralizes or normalizes all of the tones and such. So once I was sort of happy with this, which I was at this point, not much left. It was pretty much, just trying to focus a little bit more on the base. And yeah, there you saw her back. She had a nice protruding sort of hump-like spine, which was kind of cool. But yeah, so onwards and upwards, or actually downwards, but yeah, the base. I decided here to just use plain black as usual, but I was a little bit unsure how to do with the sort of extruding base that she's on, because she's supposed to be 1 inch, and I didn't want to put her on a larger base because then she would be counted in Dungeons and Dragons as a sort of large creature, which she is not. So I decided to sort of try to feather in the black onto the base and sort of keep that blue greenish a little bit in the middle, to sort of try to make it so that it seems like, it's fading from black to that blue-green, and just try to make a nice little fade. So let's see some final photos. Here she is from the front. up, and here's her back. And at this point I also put on, once all of the colors dried, I put on actually a gloss varnish, because she's supposed to look like she's come from the sea and all wet and stuff. And here's a little bit of final twirls. I have to say, I am super happy how this paint job turned out. She looks exactly as disgusting and menacing as I hoped that she would turn out to be, and I'm really looking forward to using her against my players in a campaign coming soon. Alright, I hope you liked this episode. If you have a similar story like I do with boxes of shame in your place, and you're sort of have anxiety over painting them, please drop a comment. Don't forget to like this video. And you know what? If you really like this stuff that I'm doing, consider subscribing. And with that, I hope you all have a nice day. Toodaloo.